All right, Jake. We go from the Parker Kingston news to, and it's terrible to lump these two together, but it's bad news for a BYU fan this weekend in completely different spheres, obviously. But Richie Saunders, torn ACL, out for the season. I'll leave it vague for you. What does this mean for BYU basketball?
What was supposed to be a team that had dreams of maybe making the first Final Four in BYU basketball history, maybe making out of the first weekend will be a darn near miracle at this point. Let's just put it that way, Drake. It is a major, major blow, maybe the single biggest blow outside of losing AJ DeBonsa. Losing Richie Saunders just absolutely knocks BYU down multiple pegs.
Could you argue ultimately that Saunders is the most important BYU basketball player given the way he facilitates?
Yeah, 100%. He generates extra possessions with his rebounding, his relentless energy, his overall want to, is the way I term it. That does obviously just it cannot be overstated how much of a blow this is to this basketball program. Because yes, AJ DeBonsa is a seminal talent. Rob Wright, very good in his own right. There's a number of guys on this roster that are indispensable, but maybe the most single indispensable player was Richie because he could score, he could rebound, he could facilitate. You could do everything with this kid on the court, and not having him there, man, what a major hit BYU just took.
He also bleeds blue. That's the biggest piece for me, is you're losing the heart of what BYU basketball has been for a couple of seasons now. You know, the Tater Cuts guy come the end of last year. And Jake, man, what have you heard from the Richie Saunders camp? I mean, I can only imagine this is a really tough blow for a great guy.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's the thing about this is he obviously, you mentioned he bleeds blue. This is a kid who had an opportunity to follow Mark Pope to Kentucky, made a visit to Lexington, ultimately decided his heart resided in Provo, and he wanted to stick around. You're not going to see guys at the level BYU's competing at now, speaking of the Power 4 level, that are going to be guys like him very often anymore. 4-year guys who have taken themselves from being a sixth man to the most improved player in the Big 12 to a first-team all-conference player. That's just not going to exist in this day and age of college basketball. And that's the sad part about how this story ends for Richie in terms of his BYU career, is he's taken out with about 10 games to go. And it felt like it needed to end a whole lot better than it did. And it's unfortunate because obviously he feels rotten about letting his team down. But for what he did for BYU basketball, it's just disappointing to see it have that, I don't know, lackluster. I don't know what adjective to use. That ending was not befitting of the career that Richie Saunders had with the BYU Cougars.
Yeah, you say ending, Jake. There will be some fans that are confused, namely with the way that we give out eligibility across college football and basketball now. Anybody can be eligible as long as they want. Thank you, Trinidad Chambliss, and the 9-year Montana linebacker. Is this truly it for Richie Saunders in a BYU jersey? Like, are you sure?
I guess I can't completely rule it out because you're right. Eligibility is a myth now with the NCAA. It's a very good point by you. But here's the thing. He tested the NBA waters last year, and there have been strong indications from Kevin Young and others that this was it for him in a Cougar uniform. Him and AJ were supposed to be kind of the 2 draft picks from this year's squad to kind of continue the NBA pipeline that Yegor Dielman set up last year from BYU to the NBA. And it's unfortunate because an ACL injury this time of year, that means it really puts a damper on potential being drafted. I wouldn't count Richie Saunders out of being an NBA player. I really do think his ability to compete, his ability to shoot, just his 3-point shot in particular, that's valuable stuff at the NBA level. I just think that the injury happening when it did, it may take him from what I expected to be a second-round draft pick to now he's going to have to be a two-way guy and work his way up that way.
The Dawson Baker injury, I'll go back to that. There are now 6, I think, of the original 17 BYU players that started the year who are out indefinitely, out for the season with an injury. What happened, Jake? I mean, this decimation of the roster is completely unfair. You mentioned this is Final Four hopes for this team. Is this as big of an injury slide skid as you've seen a BYU team have?
It's been a minute since I've seen one of this magnitude, especially in basketball, because this team, you're right, they had a number of injuries coming in. Nate Pickens never even saw the court, had to have season-ending knee surgery. Same with Brody Kozlowski, who never saw time on the court. Then you had the Dawson Baker injury, which he was essentially the linchpin that made that second unit really go. Losing him really put BYU essentially in a situation where their big three, speaking of Richie Saunders, AJ DeBonsa, and Rob Wright, really had to carry a major load for this team. And then, now a guy like Richie going down. It is about as bad a rash of injuries, and we're talking like season-ending significant type injuries, as I have seen in quite some time in Provo.
So I want to get your take on what the rest of the year is going to look like for BYU, but I want to go to 2026-27, actually, next basketball season. Do you assume that Dawson Baker will be back to the litany of injuries, that each of those guys will be back in a BYU uniform, and it almost creates a perfect storm of an elite team of guys that just couldn't leave due to this?
It could, because Dawson Baker does have that door open to him, according to the coaching staff, that he could get that year back of eligibility. And you're right. Eligibility, if you want to challenge for it, essentially the NCAA is going to be like, okay, whatever, do your thing. Sure. It feels that way. But they could have a really, really fine squad next year, because they're chasing kind of the next AJ DeBonsa and Bruce Branch III. And indications are that they are one of the two favorites to land him. And if they land him, that means they have their superstar freshman to obviously build the core around. I guarantee BYU will work the transfer portal again to bring in guys. They've got a couple of high-level high school prospects from the state of Utah coming into the squad. There are makings there, Drake, of a team that could be very formidable next year if they get all these guys back together, and obviously maybe make a few additions via the portal.
Jake, this year, I'm going to make a crazy statement, and I want you to qualify it. How did this happen? BYU made the Final Four despite these injuries. How would that ever come true?
It would have come true because I think that they had the star power to lead them through that.
Oh, no, Jake. Despite these injuries, I'm saying right now, this version of BYU makes the Final Four. How do they do it? Yeah, right. It sounds so foreign, but I mean, if it does happen, how did it happen?
So we just saw Jimmer Fredette get his jersey retired by BYU basketball this past weekend, the same game that Richie Saunders went down in. AJ DeBonsa will have to morph into the supernova edition of Jimmer Fredette and maybe average 50 points a game. That would get them over the top there, Drake. That's what it would have to be, in my opinion.
I mean, he is arguably the number one player in college basketball right now. So if anybody can do it, it is AJ DeBonsa, and I have faith that BYU does make the Final Four. He'll be right there. What are there much better odds, Jake, that BYU finishes as a 7 seed and loses in round 1 to the 10?
Yeah, it feels kind of that way, and that's the difficult part to kind of swallow and accept here if you're a BYU basketball fan, Drake, because this team had so much promise. They had never landed a guy the caliber of AJ DeBonsa in recruiting. They bring in Rob Wright from Baylor, and obviously that had its own, unique set of circumstances, I guess probably the best way to say it. And then you add Richie, who was a first-team All-Big 12 guy, and it just looked like a team that was set to achieve things that BYU basketball fans have only dreamed of. And the sad part is that's being ripped away from them. And yeah, it very well could be this is a team that goes from Sweet 16 caliber at least to, could be an easy 10-7, 5-12, like one of those upset picks that's a very trendy pick come bracket time.
Yeah, it's Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars coming up. Where does BYU as an athletic department, a fan base, go from here? Where is the hope? Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars.